right. There you go.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our third presentation in the series, 6 Essential Strategies That Every Note Buyer Needs to Know. And I hope you're enjoying these. I'm having fun doing them, I can tell you that. And so we've already covered where to find the notes and how to evaluate them. And tonight we're going to cover how to make your offer. So with that, let's just get started, okay? So after you evaluate the note, you decide that it looks pretty good. And the question is, what do you do now? What's the next thing to do? Well, you have to decide, do you want to buy the note and hold it yourself, or are you going to flip it? And if you're going to flip it, are you going to flip it to a private investor, or are you going to flip it to an institution? Okay, but what I'd like to do, just to keep it simple for tonight, is I want to show you how to flip a note to an institutional buyer. Because if you've never done a note before, that's where I recommend that you start. Now, actually, I recommend you start with the coaching, because if you're using my coaching program, then I'm going to walk you through the whole deal anyway. And in that case, we will most likely use one of my private investors, because typically they're easier to work with and I get the best deals. But I wanted to show you how you could be doing notes even if I weren't around, okay? And so the easiest way to start, if you've never done a note deal before, is to flip a note to an institutional buyer. That's how I got started. So the first thing that you want to do is organize your information on a submission form. And this is a typical submission form. If you've sent anything over to me, I know you've used it. I would comment that I like to have it in a Word document. Don't send me a PDF. Don't handwrite it and take a picture of it, because then I can't make any changes. So I like to have the Word document, because then I can tweak things around if I need to. So this, as you can see, well, at the very top, you want to make sure to have your name and the date at the top of the page. But then you'll see we're going to cover the property address, the name of the note seller, and the name of the payor. Okay. Then the next section is going to give information about when the note was created. What was the date of the sale of the property? And what did the property sell for? Was there a down payment? And then what was the original note amount? Then you want to go look at the note terms. How many months was it financed? What's the interest rate? What's the monthly payment? Is there a balloon? And if there is, what's the balloon date and the balloon amount? Next, we want to look at the date of the first payment, how many payments were made, how many payments are remaining, and when is the next payment due. Why is this important? Because we've got to determine how many payments are left so that we know what we're buying. How can we quote on something if we don't know what is left? And so this in particular is very important, okay? So then we calculate the current balance owed, and we also want to know the pay history. Okay, so this tells us where we are on this note today so that we can start formulating a quote. We also want to know what the credit score of the payor is. Now, I got to tell you, most of the time, the note seller won't know what the actual score is, but a lot of times they have a general idea. They'll say, man, this guy pays on time all the time. I'm sure he has perfect credit. Or, these are two people, they're both employed, they have their act together. I'm sure they've got good credit. Or it might be, this guy just went through a bad divorce. I know he's got lots of headaches. His credit is a little shaky. So normally they'll give you some idea. And if they don't know, then what we're going to do is, if they accept our offer, then we will talk to the payor and get them to pull their own credit report And that'll be part of the due diligence that we talk about on our next webinar of this series. So then we want to look at the fair market value of the property. And on this one, it was over 150,000, and that was per Zillow, which we know is not accurate, but it gives us a starting point. We use that just so we know, are we in the ballpark? And then everything is substantiated with an actual BPO, broker's price opinion, or a drive-by appraisal. So on this one, we know that it is owner occupied. There's no underlying balance. What is an underlying balance? That is if the note seller still owes the bank some money. Are they collecting payments on this mortgage and then turning around and making a payment to the bank? And if they're not, then there is no underlying balance. And we certainly need to know what type of property it is, because that's going to affect what kind of rate of return we want on when we give our quote. Your single family owner occupied property would be the one where we would give the highest quote out there. And we went over all of that. If you did not see the last webinar on evaluating a note, you might want to go back and go through that, because that's something we covered there. You'll need to know what county it is. And most importantly, you want to know, are the taxes current? If the taxes are in default, then that's a deal killer right there. We're just not going to move any further with it. So what you want to do, even before you send the note to me for a quote, I would go to the auditor's page and look it up and make sure that the taxes are current. It will save both of us a lot of time and trouble. Now, some people say, well, the note seller says that they'll pay them. They'll bring the taxes current, or they'll pay the taxes out of their proceeds. Unfortunately, that's not going to work, because one of the reasons that we don't want to buy it if the taxes are in default is because that's a pretty good indication that that payor is on shaky ground. Okay, and so that would indicate, and technically they're in default on the note and mortgage, because the mortgage requires that they keep the taxes current. So it won't work to have the note seller bring them current or pay the taxes out of the proceeds when we buy. I do appreciate if you will provide the link to the auditor's webpage. That makes it real easy for me to go online and check as well. Okay, continuing on, we want to know if the note seller ever lived in the property. Why is that important? Well, I like to know if I'm dealing with a mom and pop. And because if they did live in the property, there's a pretty good chance that they qualify for the one-time exclusion to Dodd-Frank, where you can do one note deal in any 12-month period. But if they didn't live in the property, then I need some more information, because I need to know, are they actually in the business of creating notes? If they're just a part-time investor, then perhaps they would qualify for the no more than 3 deals in a 12-month period. And if they're actively buying and selling properties and creating notes, then of course they must comply with Dodd-Frank, including having a licensed mortgage loan originator underwrite the note. Okay. And so that's why this is important, because I need to know whether to expect this to be underwritten by an MLO or not. And this next question goes along with that. If they did not live in the property, how long did the seller own the property before carrying back the note? So I want to know, is a rental property? Have they been renting it out previously? I want to know if they're just flipping the note. You know, they just bought a pool of notes and they're just flipping them off one by one. So these things give me some background into what is actually the current situation on the note, so I know what to expect and how to quote the deal. And then we have a place for other comments. I love the other comments because when you know something about the note seller and the situation and the borrower, then that helps you to either feel good about the note or feel really bad about it. There are a number of times when there could be extenuating circumstances, like maybe I'm on the fence as to whether I want this note or not. And actually, that was the case on this particular deal, which I'll show you in just a minute. The note sellers or the payors didn't have any down payment. And so, but yet they had made payments for 3 years, which is pretty good, you know? And so but the deciding factor, they did not have hard equity in the deal. And if you'll remember from last time, we talked about hard equity being either a down payment or cash pay down from an amortizing loan. And on this particular deal, they had neither. But what they did have was this 85-year-old woman who had known these people for years. She had rented to them for a number of years before she actually sold the property to them. This woman was totally honest. She was selling the note because she was very ill and she was trying to get her affairs in order before she passed. And she told me all about the borrowers renting and all of that. So I knew that this note seller, she didn't have a bad note that she was trying to dump on somebody. I knew that this was a good, solid deal because she had been working with these people for years. And so that's why these comments are so important, because they really can influence whether you do the deal or not. Okay, so let's take a look. Now, we already talked last week or last webinar about evaluating the note, but I just want to refresh you on what we determined on this one. So according to Zillow, the property is worth well over $150,000, and we said there's a current balance of $117,521. So that gives us a 78% loan to value, which is very respectable. Since it's owner occupied, we want it to be 80% or less. But when, like I said, when we look at, is there 20% hard equity from a down payment or a principal pay down? Actually, no. There was no money down, and there was only $3,500 that had been paid down over these first couple years of payments. The property type is a single-family residence. We went over the terms of the note, and they all looked good. The interest rate was very reasonable at 7%. There is a balloon that is due in 28 months. It is nicely seasoned, okay? They've been making direct deposit, so it has an excellent pay history for 32 months, almost 3 years. I love that, okay? And then when we look at the borrower's ability to pay, they do have some credit issues, but they both have good jobs. As I recall, the wife was an administrator at the local hospital. Another thing that I considered was that their credit issues were medically related. The husband had had a heart attack several years earlier, and they still had some medical bills. It wasn't like they were just flaky and didn't pay the bills. They had a real catastrophe that set them back, and they're working to get that all squared away. Plus, I look at their pay history, and they had been paying on this note on time for 32 months. But my big question is, can they refinance to pay off this balloon when it comes due in just over 2 years? Well, what's a way around that? Certainly, we can help them to refinance. We can help them to pair them up with a credit agency that's helping people to repair their credit. The funny thing is, by chance, that's exactly what happened on this deal in real life. We sold this to one of my students, and that's exactly what he does. He's an attorney, and he helps people to repair their credit. And in fact, In real life, what happened was that he helped them repair the credit, and 3 months later, they paid off. That's how good he is. So, needless to say, on this made up scenario, I'm not worried about them not being able to refinance in this particular situation. Then I look at, is it Dodd-Frank compliant? And yes, it is, because this definitely falls under the one property per year exclusion. This was the only note that the seller is created, and the only one that she is selling. And yes, the taxes are current. Okay, so that's just a rundown of the evaluation. And like I said, if you have questions on that or want more information, please refer back to last month's video on evaluating a note. Okay, so how do you know what to quote? Well, if we were going to hold this note, or if we were flipping it to a private investor, then I would have you pull out my note evaluation worksheet and do the setup, my 4 infallible steps that help you to know how to calculate a mortgage. Everybody raves about this. It's something that I personally came up with. I've never seen anybody else do it. But if you use this form, it will help you immensely, and it will keep you from making a mistake when you're giving a quote. However, on this particular example, this webinar tonight, I want to show you how you can buy a note without even picking up the calculator. Okay, so in this case, we're going to rely on the institution to run all the numbers. We're not even going to start this evaluation worksheet. Okay, so if you're not going to evaluate, how do you know what to quote? Well, it's real simple. You're going to do exactly what I did when I started many years ago. And that is, you are going to send your submission form to 3 different institutional buyers. Where are you going to find them? You are going to go online and simply Google note buyers, and you'll get a whole list of them. You do want to make sure that you're dealing with a real principal buyer. That means they're using their cash to buy the note. What you don't want to do is find one of my other students who have a website and they're using it just to pull in deals as a marketing tool, because then what's going to happen is you're going to split the profit with another student, when if you had gone directly to the financial institution yourself, you don't have to share it with anybody. Okay. Now, once you have been in the business for a while and you have looked at a number of notes, then at that point, you can, Matthew, you want to put the camera back on for a sec, please? Once you have been in the business, then you will have a good idea of what a note is worth. Okay, I have looked at so many notes that I don't need to get somebody else's opinion. Just today, like I hate quoting and saying this is what my average buy rate is or anything like that. But for the sake of teaching, I will tell you this, that in today's market, if I were quoting on a top note, you know, everything is perfect about it, I would probably I would expect that note to bear an 8% buy rate. Okay, if I were going to, I should say, if I'm like selling that to an investor, I would offer my investor an 8% rate of return on a really, really nice Class A note. Now, of course, the more things that are wrong with it, you know, no seasoning, no down payment, you know, all that kind of stuff, then I'm going to bump that rate of return up, because your rate of return needs to match the risk that's involved. Why do I not want to tell people that I typically, on a great note, will offer them an 8% return? The reason is, to them, their note is perfect, regardless of what might be wrong with it. Okay, and so don't back yourself into a corner and Because when somebody asks you, well, what do you usually quote? Can you just give me a ballpark idea? You don't respond to that, because I promise you, you're costing yourself the deal, because there's no correct answer. If you give them too low of a number, then when you go to quote, you won't be able to get the deal because you're going to quote it higher. If you give them too high of a number, then it's going to backfire on you as well. It's like you can't win in that situation. So if somebody does ask you, just give me a ballpark, your pat answer should always be, I don't have a set rate of return that I'm looking for. I actually analyze each deal on its own merits. And so if you will just give me a few minutes, it won't take more than 5 or 10 minutes. I just need some basic information, and then I will put a pencil to it, and I will get back with you and tell you to the penny exactly what I will pay for that note. And by the way, there's no obligation. If you don't like the quote, it's no problem. You can, you're not out anything, but just a few minutes of your time. Okay, so that's what you want to say when that happens. Okay, so let's go on. And what you want to do, like I said, was you want to send your submission form to 3 different institutional buyers. And then when you get these 3 quotes back, that will give you a good ballpark idea of what this note is worth. And so what I do is I normally pick the best of the 3 quotes. There is a caveat to that. If I have a particular institution that I know closes deals faster, is easier to work with, and that kind of thing, and if they're competitive with the other 2 quotes that I've got, but maybe they're just maybe $500 less or something like that, in that case, I'm probably going to go with them rather than just taking the best quote that is given to me. Okay. I do want to make one other comment. If you are using our coaching program where you are submitting deals to me, do not submit that deal to anybody else. If you do, that's grounds for me pulling the plug on the deal. And the reason is I may decide, for example, today I got a great note. It has a large balloon that's coming due, like in 3 years. And I happen to have an institutional buyer that loves large balloons. And so that works out a lot better typically than most of my private investors. And so I sent it to them for a quote. Well, if you had that deal and you also sent it to them, now I've got egg on my face. And they understand that I have no control over where the note seller sends the deal. But nonetheless, I have a reputation with these people, with these institutional buyers, and they know that generally speaking, I'm not shopping them. Nowadays, I know who I'm sending it to. I send it usually now just to the one institution that I think is going to do the deal. Sometimes I might send it to 2. I never send it to 3 anymore. I only did that in the beginning when I was just trying to get a good feel for what the note was worth. Okay, so if you're using the coaching program, do not submit the quote to anyone but me. I'm going to be the one that will submit it and get offers from whoever I think will give us the best quote. Okay, so going back to our example here, so let's say that I got this quote back for a full purchase, and this institutional buyer said that they would pay $108,090 to buy the remaining payments. And the UPB, which is the unpaid balance, is $117,521. So for the right to collect those payments, they will pay $108,000. And that will be beginning with the payment due. And this is an older note that I'm using, but let's say because this was a real quote I got. It would be beginning with the quote November 1st of 2015. And this is a buy rate of 10.97%. Now, what does that mean? The buy rate is the yield that this institution would get if they were to buy the note and hold it themselves. Okay. And so it's good to know that number because it's a way for you to compare apples to apples. Maybe somebody else gives you a quote to buy part of the note. So what this is telling us is that this institution is discounting this note to give themselves a yield of 10.97%. And the interesting thing about this is, like I say right here, the higher the buy rate, the less they're going to pay. Remember from your studies that the two are inversely proportional. It's a very important thing to know about notes. When somebody gives you a quote, the higher the yield or buy rate that they're looking for, the less they're going to pay. Okay? So this institution is looking at a buy rate of 10.97%. Now, in comparison, if we were going to a private investor might be really happy with 8 or 9%. So what does that mean? That means that that private investor would be very happy to pay more than $108,000. Okay, so you'd make more money in that case selling it to a private investor. But as I said, we're going with the institution here because we're assuming you don't know how to use a calculator. For those of you who do know how to use a calculator and you'd like to know how did we arrive at this 10.97, I'll show you right now. All you're going to do is put $108,090, that's their offer price. You make that negative and you drop that into PV on your financial calculator. You put in 28 months because they are buying 28 monthly payments of $805.02. And they're also buying the balloon. So we're going to put the balloon amount into the future value. And then we simply solve for I, and we find out that, and you can look at this like a story if you look at these numbers. If someone invests $108,090 for the right to buy 28 monthly payments of $805.02 plus a final balloon of $113,898, then that means that they would be getting a rate of return or a yield of 10.97%. Okay? Are you with me on that? Now, if you don't know how to use a calculator, just forget that I even said that, because the whole point of this example is to show you how you can do this without ever picking up your financial calculator. So now that we have this offer from our institutional buyer, we're now ready to make an offer to Sally Seller, who, by the way, has already told us that she would like to get $80,000 for this note. You might have remembered this example from my presentation. It's absolutely one of my favorite deals because Sally Seller is a perfect seller. Sally had been in real estate when way before it was common for women to be in real estate. And so for years, she had all kinds of rental properties. And then as she got up in age and didn't want to be a landlord anymore, then she started selling the properties on land contracts. And then as she was approaching, getting very ill and knew that she didn't have a lot of time left, at that point, then she decided to sell this note. And so that's how that came about. And so when Sally called up my student who found this deal, she told him, look, I've already made a boatload of money on this deal. I mean, she'd had this house for years. And she says, if I can get $80,000 for this note, we got a deal. So that made it very easy. It's much harder when you don't know what they're going to accept. But in this case, this was an easy deal. So since Sally Seller's looking for $80,000. I said, let's offer her $80,475. I simply added a little cushion so she didn't feel like we just offered her that amount because that's what she was asking for, because then she might feel that she'd left money on the table. So this gives us plenty of room to adjust the price if the borrower's credit or the BPO becomes a problem. That was on the slide. I don't know if you saw it, but I didn't mention the institutional buyer said their quote was subject to the borrower's credit and the broker's price opinion being at least $150,000. Okay, those were their contingencies. So at any rate, this is what our numbers look like. We know that we can buy this from Sally Seller for $80,475. And we have a quote for $108,090. And I might comment that normally I build in something for the costs, because normally when I am quoting to a note seller, I want to cover all of the costs. When I give them a quote, I don't want to nickel and dime them with costs. I want to wire them the exact amount that I quoted them. In this case, I didn't need to build in any expenses because this particular institutional buyer is going to cover all the expenses. So as you can see, we have a profit of $27,615. Woohoo! And that's a really nice profit, isn't it? I love these kind of deals. Okay, so real quick, I want to go through the elements of a proper offer. Your offers should always include your purchase price, okay, the exact price that you're willing to pay. And a lot of people miss this, but you need to include an exact description of what you're buying. We don't want there to be any miscommunications on what your offer is. So one of the biggest things that people do is they forget to say, they say, oh, I'm going to buy 28 monthly payments, but they forgot to say beginning when. And I have actually gotten to the table and someone says, wait a minute, you took off for the June payment, but I get the June payment. And I go back to my note purchase agreement, which is just simply restating my offer. And clearly it said that I was to get the payments beginning with the June payment. So on this particular deal, we're saying we're going to buy the entire remaining balance of $117,521, payable in 28 monthly payments of $805.02, beginning with the payment due October 15th, plus the final balloon payment of $113,898 due on February 15th, 2016. Do you see how clear that is? It is exact to the penny of what we are buying, okay? And again, you need to put the date of the first payment to you. You want to include who pays the costs. And in our case, we always pay the costs. You must put in your contingencies. And this is hands down the best weasel clause that I have ever seen in many years of being in real estate. And you can write this down because it's good even for your regular real estate deals. And that is, you want to say that your offer is subject to our exclusive review and approval of all relevant documentation, including but not limited to an appraisal, title report, credit report on the payor, not on the note seller, but on the payor, proof of pay history, and anything else that you might want to include. For example, recently I had to include proper recording of the land contract because I was quoting on a land contract that had not yet been recorded. Okay, so anything else that is important to you, you want to include in your contingencies. Now, I do something interesting here. I build in 45 days to close, but I word it very interestingly. I say, typically we close within 3 weeks, but I ask you to allow 45 days just in case there would be a glitch. And, maybe there's a title problem or a problem with the appraisal and we need extra time. Okay. So I've planted the seed that I'm probably going to close in 3 weeks. Okay. But yet I get them to allow me 45 days to close. Doesn't happen very often, but sometimes that comes in really handy because sometimes there really is a glitch. Okay. And the glitch could even be something like your investor fell off the table and you got to scramble and get a new investor. It could be something like that. And then I always let them know that the way to proceed is to let me know, and we will prepare a letter of agreement if they'd like to proceed. Okay. You need to give them an action item, and that is let me know if you'd like to proceed, and then I will prepare the letter of agreement. Okay. So with those things in mind, now we're going to actually write out our offer to Sally Seller. If you are using my coaching program, you will know that I always write this out for you. With the coaching program, I take out all the guesswork when you're making an offer. Okay. I spell it out and I send you an email and I will explain, I think we can sell this to an investor at a 10% yield or whatever it is. And this means that they would pay X amount of dollars. If we deduct 10,000 for our profit, that means our offer will be this much. I explain it all, and then I actually type out the offer and I put it in red. So anything in my email that is in red, you know that you can relay that to Sally Seller, because you don't want Sally Seller to know what our buyer's paying for it. That information is all confidential. And so it's nice if you have this in red because you can read it. Or what is really a nice thing to do is to give this to them verbally. And then also, I changed the font color to black. I would get rid of the red font, but then also email this offer to them as a backup. Some people like to just email the offer to them. Personally, I think that's usually a mistake because the success of your deal really depends on you establishing a rapport with the note seller. And it's very hard to establish a good rapport if you're just communicating by email. I would much rather talk to them, hear my voice, know that I'm friendly, that I'm easy to work with, that I'm sincere and honest, and that will help them to feel comfortable and want to proceed and deal with me. I truly believe that many times that phone call and my developing a rapport with them will get me the deal over someone else. I know that to be true because people will say, so-and-so offered me $1,000 more, but I feel much more comfortable working with you. I get that pretty frequently, something like that. Okay. Okay, so this is what our offer is going to look like. Once again, just as I said in our procedures on the last slide, we're going to say we will pay $80,475 net cash to you. What does that mean? That means you're getting cash and there's going to be nothing else taken out. You are going to receive, Sally Seller is going to receive $80,475, and it will be wired to her from a title company or attorney's office. And for that, we will be buying the remaining 28 monthly payments of $805.02, beginning with a payment due October 15th, plus the final balloon of $113,000, which is due February 15th. Okay, we already went over that. Okay, next, we pay all costs of closing. You will receive a check or wire transfer for $80,475. Our offer is subject to our exclusive review and approval of all relevant documentation, including but not limited to an appraisal, title work, credit report on the payor, and proof of pay history. I started to mention this to you before, but I don't think I really fully explained it. The reason this is such a fantastic escape clause or weasel clause is because it's so broad. Like, people will use things like it's subject to my partner's approval or subject to my CPA's approval and stuff like that. That's a major red flag to people. They know it's a weasel clause and they usually will cross it off of the contract. But this is so broad. Exclusive review and approval means if I look at something and I don't like the color of the font they used, or I don't like anything, whatever it could be, for any reason I don't like this, then I don't have to buy it. And it's of all relevant documentation. And the reason that nobody catches this, if you're buying a note especially, doesn't it seem realistic that you ought to be able to review everything? There's so many different things you can look at, and how can you possibly name everything in a clause? So it totally is reasonable and makes sense. And at the same time, it gives you tremendous control in the deal. And that's why I'm not afraid to make these offers, because if for any reason I don't want to go through with it, I have plenty of reason that I can legally back out of it. Okay. Remember, one of the things that I teach you is how to buy and sell notes risk-free. And this is a key feature of that, because you are not going to buy this note until you know that you've already got it sold to your end buyer. Okay. You've already got a quote, and we know that this institution is going to pay very nicely for this note. Okay. So you get the institution under contract, you get Sally under contract, your seller under contract, and that way it is risk-free. If something blows up on you unexpectedly, you have this weasel clause that you can easily get out of it. And that is why when you do transactions like I teach you, it really is risk-free. Okay. One other thing I might mention is, typically when you're dealing with an institution, they're not going to sign a contract. The fact of the matter is that they stand behind their quotes, because if they didn't, they'd be out of business in no time at all. But if I will leave it up to you whether you get a contract with if you're using a private investor. Normally anymore, I don't. I used to all the time, but I found it was cumbersome and not necessary, because it's easy to find another buyer. And if they wanted to back out, I sure wouldn't want to force them to buy something that they don't want. But the fact is that most of the time, I know my investors, and they don't want to burn a bridge with me. And so I can't say that I do not recall ever having an investor committing to do a deal and then backing out after the fact. I don't recall any time that has happened in 30 years. Okay, moving on. So in our offer, we want to say we typically close within 3 weeks of receiving copies of your documents. That is very important. The clock does not start ticking until you have everything you need from them. I mean, you can say I'm going to close in 45 days, but if they deliver you a copy of the note and the pay history on the 44th day, I don't think you're going to be able to close in 24 hours. Okay, so be sure you add that. We typically close within 3 weeks of receiving copies of your documents, but we ask you to allow 45 days in case there are any unforeseen issues with the title or the appraisal. And then again, we'll prepare a letter of agreement if you'd like to proceed. And actually, I think it is better to give them an action thing and say, if you'd like to proceed, please let me know, and I'll prepare a letter of agreement. So Sally loves this offer. She accepts this offer. What do we need to do next? We need to get this under contract. Okay. So I used to use a very sophisticated note purchase agreement. It was 7 or 8 pages long. It was all notarized, had a lot of legalese in it. And it was great because it protects you if the note seller tries to back out of the deal, or if the borrower says, hey, you're selling at a discount, I'll pay you off. You know, don't sell it to them. Let me buy it at a discount. And so in my long note purchase form, it had things that would really protect you from that. But what I found was that that was scaring more people away than it was helping me. And so I started using this very simple little letter form, and I found that I got a lot more deals accepted. So nowadays, what I do, if I am dealing with an experienced note seller, or if it is a commercial transaction, then by all means, please use my long form. And I do go over that in detail in the Note Buyer's Master Guide or on the media set that you probably already have. But otherwise, I would simply use this short letter form. It is equally as binding as my 7-page comprehensive contract that's full of legalese. So as you can see here, I'm just restating exactly what we're buying. If prior to closing, you should receive the October payment or any other payment due thereafter. You just go ahead and deposit them as usual, and we will simply deduct that amount from your sale proceeds. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, you don't state the payment amount. I do further down in one of these other bullets. The thing about this is, it is so important to be very clear about who gets which payments, that I want that up front and center, that we're buying payments beginning with the payment due October 15th. And by the way, if they happen to collect the September payment, they can go ahead and cash that check. But know that when we go to close, I am going to deduct that from the $80,475. And that is the only deduction that I ever make to the amount that I've quoted, if they have already received one of the payments that I was supposed to get. Okay. Next, we pay all expenses. They're going to receive a wire transfer. And this is where I get very specific. After the September 15th payment is made, the current balance owed on the note will be approximately $117,640. The reason that I say approximately is they may use a slightly different amortization. What happens is there's different ways of calculating your interest. And like sometimes it might be based on a 365-day year, sometimes 360 days, and that can throw it off by just a few pennies. So in case they've run an amortization and I didn't get to see it, that's why I say approximately. The important part is that it is payable in 29 monthly payments of $805 plus a final balloon payment of $113,898. I just realized something that I need to change on here because this says that there are 29 payments left. And as I recall, what happened was in real life, there were 29 payments left, and I changed it to 28 payments. I don't really want to go into all the details. It was taking longer than what we had anticipated, and so I gave her an extra month. So that 29 payments should say 28 payments. Okay. Okay. Our purchase is subject to our exclusive review and approval of all relevant documents, including but not limited to the appraisal, title, credit report on the payor, and I would add in here the pay history. Okay. Oh, notice there it said, back up here. Did you see that last line? we reserve the right to assign this agreement to another investor. Okay. I kind of slipped that in. Okay. The general rule of thumb is unless a contract says that it is not assignable, then it is. But I don't want there to be any question if they come back and they say, wait a minute, I thought you were buying this. You're selling it to somebody else? I don't want to do that. Well, it's right here in the contract that I have the right to do that. Okay. Okay, we typically close within 3 weeks of receiving the documents, but we ask you to allow 45 days. The closing will take place at a title company in ABC County, which is the county where the property is located. If they have an existing title policy, then we will usually use that same title company. Even if they don't have title work, if it's fairly recent, when we normally go back to the title company where the closing took place, because chances are they did run title and do title work, and it will just be a lot quicker and easier and less expensive if we can reuse what work has already been done. And I let them know right up front that they are going to need to bring the original promissory note and a picture ID to the closing. I do this because some people may just think, no big deal, I've got a copy of it. Or I want to put them on notice immediately that they need to make sure they've got that original promissory note. Okay. So then I tell them to please sign and date the acceptance clause at the bottom of the letter and return the letter to me along with these other documents. Now, they already gave me a copy of the note and the deed of trust, so I don't need that. But I am going to need a copy of the settlement statement. The thing is that the settlement statement is very important because it confirms the down payment and the sales price of the property, and it tells me what title company to go to. So some people think that that's not important, but it really is. I like to see if they have any existing appraisals. I would like to see it. Although I am going to order a current one, it at least gives me a basis of what to expect. I'd like a copy of any existing title work that they have. If they have an amortization schedule, I would like a copy. That way I'm using the same thing that they are. I will have to have the telephone numbers for the borrowers, because I will need to contact them and let them know that we're going to be buying the note. I will also want to see about getting a copy of their credit report, and I'll need to get a copy of their insurance declaration page if the note seller doesn't already have it. The next thing is their social security numbers. Now, I kind of play this by ear. The thing is that if the note seller does not have the social security numbers, I really do not want the note seller to call the borrower before this agreement is signed and alert them to the fact that they are thinking of selling the note. Why? Because I don't want the borrower to say, hey, you're selling at a discount? Heck, don't sell to her. You know, I'll refinance and pay you off. My mom, I just got some inheritance. I'll pay you off. My mom will lend me the money. What's the price? You know, I'll just pay you off. So you need to use just some good common sense and decide whether you want to leave that on there or not. If you think that it is likely that the borrowers might be able to pay off, then I would take that out and I would simply ask them for the social security numbers later. But that's just a call that you're going to have to make on your own. But at some point, you're going to have to have the social security numbers, or you're going to have to, well, you're going to have the social security numbers in order to do your year-end tax reporting once the borrower starts making payments to you. Okay. Now, one of the ways that I think it makes it very easy to get the social security numbers is we do the mortgagee affidavit, and that is, mortgage or affidavit. We actually do both of them, but it is the borrowers will be signing the mortgage or affidavit, and I simply insert a clause in there that has them give the social security numbers, and I make a comment that by law, you know, we have to send them a tax statement at the end of the year and let them know how much interest they have paid. And for that reason, we have to have the Social Security number. That's a real good way to slip that in. And I also use that affidavit to obtain the name of their insurance company and agent so that I can make sure that my end buyer is added on as the mortgagee insured. Okay? So this is the information that we need to get from them. One thing that's important is I don't want to hold up the deal waiting for this, hold up this note purchase agreement, waiting for them to get this information. The most important thing is to get them to sign the agreement. So you can encourage them to send the agreement back, sign it, send it back with these items. But if they say, oh, you know what, I got to wait for my husband to get back in town because I don't know where he put the title work. You say, no worries, just go ahead and sign it and send it over. Actually, that's not a good example because if both parties are on the note, then both parties have to sign the agreement. But you know what I'm saying. Don't let them make up excuses to not sign the contract. You want this note purchase agreement signed and returned to you as quickly as possible, hopefully with all of these items, but if not, they can follow up and send you what you need. Okay, this is the bottom of the agreement where I mentioned that they need to accept. So it just says that I accept your offer and agree to sell you the above mentioned note and deed of trust. Based on the terms stated above, I understand that the closing will take place within 45 days. So this is where Sally, and if there's a Sam seller, like I said, they would sign as well. And this is where I keep the note seller's contact information. I always know that I can get their email or phone number by going back to this agreement and looking on the last page. Okay, so now what happens? You've got this contract in your name, or if we're doing the easiest 1, 2, 3 coaching, it'll be in my name. What do you do then? Well, all you need to do, because remember, we're selling this to an institution, you simply endorse this to the institution. Or in this case, I was using the example that you can get this contract signed in your name. And if we're using the easiest 1, 2, 3 coaching, endorse it to me. Okay. That happens to be what this example is. But for the purposes of this webinar, we said that we're selling it to an institution. So it would simply say that the undersigned hereby assigns without recourse all right, title, and interest in and to this agreement to XYZ note buying institution. Okay. And you're assigning that to the institution for a fee. Well, what's the fee going to be? Your profit. You are assigning that to them for $27,615. Okay. Now, why do we want this to be assigned? It's because you don't want to be brokering a deal. It really, really bothers me, the number of, and by the way, we can go back to the camera, Matthew, if you don't mind, please. So it really bothers me when gurus will tell you that you're going to broker a transaction. You should never, ever use the term broker unless you are a licensed mortgage broker. And I kind of don't think you are. At least most of my students aren't. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you are, in fact, operating as a dealer. What is a dealer? A dealer is someone who is a principal in the transaction. And there's 2 ways that you can do that. I'm sure that you've seen this on my presentations. If not, go back to the master guide or go back to the media set and watch. One way is to do the simultaneous close. And that is typically like 9 out of 10 times, I'm going to do a simultaneous close. But if I am selling to an institutional buyer, then all I need to do is simply assign my contract, and I just assign that contract to them, and I collect a fee for it. So Now you've seen how we have just flipped a note to an institutional buyer without using any of your own cash or credit and without even having to use the calculator. And in fact, if you want to know your rate of return, what is it? It's infinite because you have none of your own money invested in it. Okay. So I wanted to make sure that you realized, see, people sometimes they think, you know what, I just don't like numbers. I don't like fooling with a calculator. I don't want to do notes. I've just shown you, you don't have to use a calculator. This is a people business. And as long as you are reselling to someone who knows how to do the calculations, all you need is a price from them. And you deduct whatever profit you want and you requote to the note seller. If they say yes, you have a deal, and you've never even picked up a calculator. Okay. And you can make lots of money, good profits, just flipping notes just like this. Okay. So I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. And I do want to mention that we have our Note Buyer Academy coming up September 19th through the 22nd. And if you're not familiar with that, I invite you to check that out. If you've enjoyed this style of teaching, then by all means, you would not want to miss my 4-day academy. It is an actual experience, let me tell you. It is like no other boot camp that you've been to. It's completely different. You're going to be networking with probably about 50 or 60 people. It's a small group. The education is unparalleled. I would put my teaching up against anybody else's teaching out there. I don't know anyone who is as thorough and comprehensive. Everybody says that they love that I am step by step. I take what some people consider to be a complicated topic and I make it easy. Hopefully you realize that from this webinar series that I'm doing. So you're going to get the education that you need to start doing notes right away. Plus, you're going to have the opportunity to network with other like-minded people. There will be note investors there. I have guest speakers. Alan Calgill is always one of my favorite speakers. He teaches private lending, which fits in so nicely with the note buying. My son, Ben, is a real estate attorney. He's there and he will share about using trusts and asset protection and that kind of thing. So it's important to know that it is not a dog and pony show of speakers. It's just that I can't talk for 12 hours straight. And we go from 8:30 in the morning until about 9 o'clock at night. And so I do usually have one other speaker sometime during the day. This is held, Matthew, can you, let's see, where do we have, maybe I can find this myself. I want to go to where we have the pictures of everybody eating all that good food. Here's the classroom setting you can see there. This is the riverboat cruise. Let's stop right there for 1 second, Matthew. So in addition to feeding you really well, on Saturday night, I take you on a riverboat cruise. And we actually go up the Ohio River about an hour and a half, have a really nice dinner, and then come back down. Let me tell you, after being in the classroom for 3 days, it's a great breakaway. It's a great way to get to know everybody, to network, and just kick back and have a good time. Here's some other pictures there. There's Alan. There's my son, Ben, speaking. Here we are. We hold this at the Radisson Hotel in Covington, Kentucky, which is right across the river from Cincinnati. And it is an iconic hotel. If you've been to the city, I know you've seen it. It's the round hotel that has the revolving restaurant on top. They have an excellent, excellent chef. And every year we go there, people just rave about the food. Their big complaint is they usually gain 10 pounds over the 4 days. But we go up to the 16th or the 18th floor, and we all have our meals together. We have a great buffet lunch and dinner. You can see it's a great time to mingle with everybody, get to know everybody that's in the class. So the food is great. Oh, the breakfast, we have a continental breakfast that we actually serve in the classroom. Okay, and then scrolling down, you can see here we are on the boat again. Here's a picture of us, everybody at, I don't know if that's the helm of the boat, I'm not sure, but there we are gathered for a group picture. And so you can see we're having a lot of fun. It's just a really neat experience. And so you might be wondering, what are you going to learn? Well, you're going to learn all about notes. I cover every aspect of doing notes. If you want to simply flip seller carryback notes, we'll talk about that. If you want to buy the notes to hold, maybe you have your own cash, maybe you want to use your self-directed IRA. Actually, Carl Fisher with Camaplan will be there, and he will. He has a great presentation and shares a lot of insight on how you can really use your IRA, do notes in your IRA to grow your IRA very, very quickly. Perhaps you're a landlord and you're tired of managing properties, much like Miss Sally was, and maybe you would like to know how you can convert those properties to passive income. Why just sell them off when you have time and money invested in those? You know they're a great property. Why not convert those to seller carryback notes or land contracts? So that's something that we'll be going over. We're going to be talking about private lending, how you can actually lend funds out. We're going to be talking about non-performing notes. If you are interested in buying notes from banks at large discounts, and then you can either use those notes as a back door to getting the property to build your portfolio, or you can use my forbearance agreement. You can modify that note, and you're going to be amazed at the rates of return that you can get. I also talk a lot about partials, which is one of my favorite techniques to do. So it's just a really a vast array of knowledge that you're going to get. And the idea is that one of the beauties of doing notes is you can tailor make a game plan to fit whatever your particular situation is, as well as whatever your goals are. So it doesn't matter if you've just gone through bankruptcy or you've gone through a foreclosure, you have no cash, no credit, you've lost all your money in your IRA, or you're sitting on $20 million that you need to figure out how to invest. Believe me, I've got a way to do it. And we get people who are brand new to the note buying, as well as experienced investors that hold millions of dollars of notes. So truly, if you have any interest in doing notes, this is the place to come and learn. Another thing I want to comment on, if you didn't see it, I believe it's part of the blog, but a couple months ago, I did a webinar with my friend Mark Halpern, and it was how to be a part-time note investor. You see, people make it so much harder than it is. People think that they've got to learn the note business. And the fact of the matter is, you don't need to learn the note business. I can show you how you can really, really make a lot of money and build significant financial wealth simply by doing a couple deals a year. A year. I mean, I'm talking about spending 40 hours a year on note buying. So you really don't have to go into a full-time note business. So here, Matthew was kind enough to bring that up on the blog. So you might want to check this out later. Just check out the blog and listen to this. It's a great, it's one of the best webinars that I've ever done. Okay, so Matthew, if you'll take us over so we can show people how they can sign up. So if you just go here, you go to the Academy at the top menu and use that drop-down menu, go to Register Now, and you'll see here the 4 days of live training. That also includes the 2018 media set. And why do I do that? Because I am trying to empower you to do notes. And the more information that I can get in your hands, especially even before you come to the Academy, the more that you're going to learn at the Academy. I have people who come back 5 and 6 times, and they say every time they come, they learn something new. part of that is because I always include lots of examples of current deals that I'm working on. And so it is, every year is different, okay? But that's why I'm doing this webinar series, because for those of you, especially who are brand new, I want you to get some of the basics so that when you do come to the Academy, it's the second or third time that you've heard the information. And then instead of just getting the basics, you get all the really cool little tidbits, okay? So we've got our super early bird special going on, and that is $17.97 a person. The regular price is $24.97, but you can sign up now and save $800. Is that right? $700? $700. You also get the media set free. You can bring your spouse or legitimate business partner for only $600 extra. And that $600 is because it cost me over $500 just for the food and the cruise. That's a real expense to me. And so all I ask is that you cover the cost, and I'm not charging registration for your partner. I do ask that it be your legitimate life partner or business partner. It's not fair just to bring extra people. That's not fair to me. So all you do is use the drop-down menu, if you'll show them, Matthew, and select which you want. Are you registering for 1 or 2? It is a prerequisite that you have the master guide system, because there is so much information in there that you may want to refer back to it. I need to be able to refer back to it, okay? So if you don't already have it, I have made a special offer here that you can include that. So Matthew, if you'll hit that drop-down menu again, they can add that to this bundle for only $997, okay? So select which one applies to you, simply hit add to cart, and you'll be all set. You will be registered for this year's Academy. You can see here, just simply fill that out and you're good to go. If you have any questions at all, by all means, simply email info@thenotebuyer.com. Many of you have already talked to Matthew. You know, he is there to serve. He's happy to help you with anything he can, and he will make sure to get you and your partner all registered and all set up. Okay, I think I've covered everything. Matthew, do we have any questions from anyone?
No questions at this time, Don.
Wow, I must have been really thorough tonight. So, okay, well, I really hope that you have enjoyed this webinar and the entire webinar series. Next month, I believe we're talking about due diligence. So that will be a very informative webinar as well. And if you haven't already signed up for the Academy, I encourage you to check it out and seriously try to clear your schedule. I only do one of these a year, and I promise you, it will be life-changing for you. If you are serious about changing your financial future, you don't want to miss my 4-day Note Buyers Academy in September. And so with that, I just want to wish you well, and blessings to you, and I'll sign off and see you next month. Bless you all.